Okay, so I wasn't quite sure where I wanted to be. Wasn't quite sure who I was going to talk about tonight. I was guessing that I was going to go with Hank Williams, but I decided at the last moment here to kind of switch it out for Cesare Pavese, which is probably really, really bad pronunciation. But his birthday is today. Alfred Jury's was yesterday. So I'm going to kind of flicker back and forth between the two of them a bit and get to Hank some other time. Borges is, of course, coming up too, which will get me back to Guy de Maupassant, who I missed, but have mentioned that I was going to do before. Okay, so for people who don't know about Pavese at all, give you a quick rundown here. So he was born in 1908, dies in 1950. It is a suicide. It's interesting because I first became aware of his work reading a neo-avant-garde collection of Italian writers. Although when you look up the neo-avant-garde, he is not he's not in a lot of those writings about him. But that's also because he died in 1950. But I think that particular collection wanted to make sure to include him because he's probably like kind of a godparent in some ways to some of those writers. Anyway, so let me just give you a little quick rundown here. And this is directly from the Wikipedia, so you can just read it really quickly yourself too. But it's just important because of what it's going to lay out for us, which is that Pavese moved in anti-fascist circles. In 1935, he was arrested and convicted for having letters from a political prisoner. After a few months in prison, he was sent into confino, internal exile in southern Italy. So it's important to point out that one, he's a political writer. Two, he did do some time, not a lot. Somebody could say he definitely didn't do a bid, but he definitely did get some time, and he got sent into exile. He's also an atheist. That's important to point out too. But much like I discussed with Para and other writers, is that he's definitely another political guy. Another thing that's interesting about Pavese is how much he was influenced by a lot of American writers. I'm going to get to that in a second. I'm going to jump ahead to themes in his works, which is why he's one of those people that I gravitated towards. Even though I hadn't read a lot of more recent Italian writing, obviously, read Dante and I read some Petrarch, but Pavese, Montale, Pasolini are the ones who stick out to me most for like more recent Italian writing. And even that's not very recent, it's still pushing back into the 50s, 60s, 70s. So anyway, here's some of the themes here. The typical protagonist in the works of Pavese is a loner through choice or through circumstances. It's important to note that he did write novels and poetry. His relationship with men and women tend to be temporary and superficial. He may wish to have solidarity with other people, but he often ends up betraying his ideals and friends, for example, in the prison. One of his collections of work is called Disaffections, so he's also pushing away from a certain sort of sentimentality, as we've seen with Nicanor Parra, as I kind of discussed with some other writers also. What's important to know about Pavese, I think, is that I don't really believe he was as disaffectionate as people, as he even writes about himself, but that it was important for him to put some space between a certain amount of sentimentality and the politics that he had to deal with, which makes sense. It's the same exact thing I was discussing with Nicanor Parra. Nicanor Parra really comes up with a lot of his ideas in the 50s, and as we see here, he died. Pavese died in 1950. I'm going to read Street Song by Pavese. Here we go. Why be ashamed when one has done time if they let one out? It's because, like everyone else who belongs to the streets, one has been in prison. From morning till evening we wander the avenues, whether it's raining or beautiful sun's showing its face. It's a joy to meet on the avenues people who talk, and talking amongst ourselves bump into girls. It's a joy to wait and whistle at girls from doorways, hug them on the streets, and take them to movies, and smoking in secret, lean on their beautiful knees. It's a joy to talk and finger them laughing, and at night in bed feeling flung on one's neck, their two arms pulling you down, thinking of morning when one is released from prison in the fresh sunlight. There's one more stanza here, but I just want to get at, as you can see, obviously there's some sense of lust, if not love, and desire for some sort of connection, which is why I say I don't think he's as anti-sentimental or as disaffectionate as he is put out there to be. And it's also interesting, too, because some of his writing about his prison time there, even though it's a political prisoner, although I would argue that, all anybody going to prison is kind of a political prisoner. In some ways, it reminds me of some of the other famous writers who have gone to prison. Maybe a little bit of Jean Genet, and definitely a lot of Miguel Pinheiro, I think I get from his writing, too. And we'll get to why he's similar to Miguel Pinheiro to me is when I get to his discussion of slang. From morning till evening, wandering drunk and watching laughing passers-by, enjoying everybody, even ugly people, just to feel themselves on the streets. From morning till evening, singing drunkenly and meeting drunkards and starting discussions that last a long time and make us thirsty. All these characters who go talking among themselves, we want them with us at night, down in the trough, and to hound them with our guitar that skips drunkenly and cannot stay confined, but throws the doors wide open to echo in the air. Outside water or stars may rain down. It doesn't matter if on the avenues at this hour no beautiful girls are strolling. Among us is one who laughs to himself, because he has been released from prison tonight, and with him, raising a ruckus and singing, we'll make it to morning. Cesare Pavese is not really that well known in America from what I can tell. And if he is well known in Italy, a lot of it had to do with Italo Calvino really going out of his way to bring him to a certain status in Italian writing. He definitely went out of his way to collect a lot of his works, get them out there and published and stuff like that. There are lots of collections of Pavese's letters, which I'm starting to understand are really, really important to him, and I'll try to get back around to letters by Pavese at some other point, because I have not read a lot of letters on Pavese, but I was watching something earlier on YouTube about his letters specifically. Amherst seems to have a big collection of them. If you look up Pavese in America, you can find that talk. It's like 2 hours long, so I didn't quite finish it, but it just brought up some things that I didn't really know about. So I'm going to jump ahead here. There was a poem I'm going to read, but I wanted to get to his some of his ideas about slang. And this is from the Paris Review. It's written by Anthony Madrid. Give him that credit. And this is January 4th, 2017. So I like the way this begins, and I'm going to jump around in the article a little bit. A great many writers whom I admire are supposedly fluent in several languages. I say supposedly. I have my doubts. Fluent is a big word. In my own life, when I meet Americans who speak French or speak Spanish, I like to put up at least a little bit of resistance. Like, okay, so what's the word for belt buckle? Which I always laugh about it too, because I don't know that a lot of people are as fluent as they believe themselves to be, so much as they're serviceable. It's hard to really be fluent in another language because you can't get every single word that you want. In some ways, it's hard to even say that you're fluent in your own language, because obviously we're all missing something. So this is going to have some of his writing from his letters, but I want to jump ahead here and say one of the things about Pavese. So, for years, I thought I should check out Pavese's correspondence because I knew some of his last letters written in the 6 months before he committed suicide, age 41 in Rome, which I already talked about, were in English. And he addressed to one of his very last loves, an American actress named Constance Dowling. It's interesting that some of his last pieces were written in English. It kind of reminds me of Beckett switching over to French and writing in French. So, you'll need to know a little more than that, actually. Not everyone over here knows that Pavese was deeply interested in American literature, especially 20th century American literature. He apparently translated Sinclair Lewis, Sherwood Anderson, John Dos Passos, going to skip that name because I don't like that person, William Faulkner, and back to 19th century Moby Dick. He also translated Dickens and Defoe and James Joyce. So a lot of his understanding about writing really was influenced by American writing. What I get upset about is how we know so many international writers were influenced by American writers, and yet we don't go and read who they influenced. I have real problems with how little we read of international writers, especially how few writers we read outside of England, Ireland, Scotland, and how we skip over like Italy specifically, Spain definitely, Greece, Turkey. We don't really read a lot of those certain European groups, and then even more so like Hungary and Poland and things like that. Before we even deal with the fact that we do a big disservice to Africa, Asia, and the Middle East in terms of reading that. But I don't want to talk too much about that. But anyway, so I'm going to jump ahead to is this letter that he wrote to Mr. Chiomanato, I think is the best I can say it. I think that's how I heard it earlier tonight, but I want to jump to this letter because it was a letter that was spoken of in that video that you can see on YouTube. So, dear Mr. Chiomanato, which, as I said, probably pretty close, maybe not, I'm befuddled, all in a daze with your titanic kindness. I'm now seeing the world only through a veil of pink sheets, all bristling with slang phrases which are meddling together, re-echoing and staring at me from everywhere. I've got now I can no more take a pull out of a bottle together with my gang without thinking I'm going on the grand sneak. And how flip I get sometimes. My whole existence has got a slang drift now. You could almost say I'm a slang slinger. So where I was saying that he reminds me a lot of people like Miguel Pinheiro, because Miguel Pinheiro, much like people like Paul Laurence Dunbar and Claude McKay before him, were definitely interested in making sure that dialect and slang were out there all the time for people to be reading because it's what people were listening to. With Miguel Pinheiro, in Short Eyes, he kind of plays with how things are misunderstood a little bit, and he also mentions the Izzle language of prison, which is where Snoop Dogg got his Izzle stuff too, was from that language, but that is mentioned early on in a Miguel Pinheiro play, so I just wanted to bring that up. And again, I wanted to explain how Pavese is a very political writer. He's doing a lot of slang. Even though he's read a lot of these American people, he doesn't allow himself to get out of his very urban understanding of Italy. And that's important because it's something I've been harping on pretty much from the first video I've done and up to this video, and we'll keep discussing, is the importance for a certain sort of urban literature that gets really, really close to the ground level and discussing what is going on amongst everyday people, non-academic people, although there's nothing wrong with being an academic person, but sometimes we lose track of what people are just saying to each other on the streets. Obviously, there should be some discussion of rural literature in the same way, and that's why it's important to be reading that too and to get an understanding of what the everyday person is thinking about. So I'm going to jump ahead in this article here and get to some of his like kind of fun stuff here. So like his sign-offs are like, now pardon me, my long silence. and have a friendly wallop on the shoulder. Good night, old socks, and keep remembering. So that's some fun. And then he has these little things because he liked American writing. He used Gatsby era slang like toodaloo, hunky-dory, old chap, doggone, corking, and he liked to use methinks, tis, beseech, sportful in these letters. They don't always come out in his poetry, but it's fun to know that he was understanding how languages working across different languages, how slang was working, and like I said, just common dialect. So I'm going to jump back here to some quotes by him, and what I'm going to do after I get to some of these quotes, because I do like to have it kind of mixed up, so these quotes are from no particular poem in particular. I'm going to run back to a poem that I do enjoy by him, and then I'm going to just say a couple things about Alfred Jarry, whose birthday was also pretty recently. So here's some Pavese stuff, which is, like I said, kind of a bit aleatory, and I didn't pick it, but so... Every luxury must be paid for, and everything is a luxury, starting with being in this world, which really is a lot of what he has to say in Disaffections. If you haven't read Disaffections, that's a big collection of his work, definitely worth looking at, and it reminds me a lot of, in some ways, the Dickinson element is there. You can definitely feel the Dickinson in that book. You can feel a bit of the Whitman in him, but... there are these moments where it's like he constructs a poem very similar to some of our early American writers. And I would say if you read Disaffections and you like that, then definitely read Eugenio Montale, who lived throughout his the lifespan of Pavese and wrote similarly also and played with language in similar ways. So here's another Pavese thing. We do not remember days, we remember moments, the richness of life and memories we have forgotten. And then I'm going to jump ahead before I go back to this poem that I want to read. So, the words that strike us are those that awake and echo in a zone we have already made our own. The place where we live, and the vibration enables us to find fresh starting points within ourselves. Okay, and now here's... one that I did pick out specifically that I want to make sure I touched on, because it is probably the poem that is most like what we think of Pavese being like, whereas I said he was a loner, and most of his work is about that, and that is Passion for Solitude. This one's translated by Jeffrey Brock. I'll put that out there. Sometimes I forget to mention who translates stuff. It's important to bring up the translators themselves and the work that they've done. So, Passion for Solitude. I'm eating a little supper by the bright window. The room's already dark. The sky starting to turn. Outside my door, the quiet roads lead after a short walk to open fields. I'm eating, watching the sky. Who knows how many women are eating now? My body is calm. Labor dulls all the senses, and dulls women too. Outside, after supper, the stars will come out to touch the wide plain of the earth. I'm going to pause there and get back to it. But in looking at this piece, we can ask ourselves, is this sort of an urban pastoral piece? In which case, I would say yes. Are people calling pieces like this eco-poetics now? Yes, they absolutely are. I have some issues with the idea of what people are calling eco-poetics and what people are not calling eco-poetics, but there is nothing in this piece that doesn't seem like a lot of the stuff that you see in a lot of eco-poetics and in a lot of pastorals. And I would say, if you've read Black Nature, which was put together by Camille Dungy about African-American, well, it says African-American eco-poetics, but it has Claude McKay in it, so it just has Black Americans in it because he's Caribbean, and I didn't appreciate that was not spoken of in that book. But anyway, I would say if you like that kind of writing, it's something you get a lot of in Pavese. He definitely does urban pastorals also, and he definitely approaches eco-poetics in a very urban and political way also. He doesn't let the land get away from him, as I would like to say. And you see that in country music also. I could definitely read this piece and then take you over to a Hank Williams song. But I got Hank Williams coming up, and I'm going to discuss a little bit of his eco work there too. Anyway, outside after supper, the stars will come out to touch the wide plain of the earth. The stars are alive, but not worth these cherries which I'm eating alone. I look at the sky, know that lights already are shining among rust-red roofs, noise of people beneath them, a gulp of my drink, and my body can taste the life of plants and of rivers. It feels detached from things. A small dose of silence suffices, and everything's still in its true place, just like my body is still. All things become islands before my senses, which accept them as a matter of course, a murmur of silence. All things in this darkness, I can know all of them, just as I know that blood flows in my veins. The plain is a great flowing of water through plants, a supper of all things. Each plant and each stone lives motionlessly. I hear my foot feeding my veins, and with each living thing that this plain provides. The night doesn't matter. The square patch of sky whispers all the loud noises to me, and a small star struggles in emptiness, far from all foods, from all houses, alien. It isn't enough for itself. It needs too many companions. Here in the dark alone, my body is calm. It feels it's in charge. So I appreciate that piece, Passion for Solitude. It reminds me a lot of Pessoa's Book of Disquiet. You can certainly, if you've read Italo Calvino, and I'm sure most of you have read more Italo Calvino than I have, you can definitely understand how he was influenced by this, because he definitely has these moments of taking himself out of a space a little bit and trying to observe. Now, this doesn't quite go together, but I wanted to touch on Alfred Jarry because his birthday was also recently, and they're really two very different kinds of writers. Alfred Jarry obviously dies a lot earlier on than Pavese, but I think they're both pretty important in their influences upon one, European writing, and two, avant-garde writing in general. So I want to discuss Alfred Jarry. Alfred Jarry also definitely has his influence upon punk music. I mean, there is Pere Ubu because of Ubu Wa. So I'm just going to read a couple quotes from Alfred Jarry before ending this thing here, and just let you know, if you haven't read any Alfred Jarry, should read some Alfred Jarry. I like his poems. I actually haven't read Super Male, which I don't know why I haven't read that one, but that's his really famous one. Okay, so there are only hallucinations or perceptions, and that there are neither nights nor days, and that life is continuous, yet that one would never be aware of its continuity, nor even that life exists without these pendulum movements, and life is primarily verified by the beating of the heart. And this one discusses pataphysics a little bit, which is, for me, fascinating, because I feel like pataphysics obviously works alongside and through surrealism, but also really leads to what we have now in terms of dream punk writing and dream funk writing and all that kind of stuff, and like science fantasy in some ways owes a bit of a debt to the idea of pataphysics and creating this false sense of science and physics. So anyway, pataphysics will be, above all, the science of the particular, despite the common opinion that only science is that of the general. Pataphysics will examine the laws governing exceptions, and will explain the universe supplementary to this one, or less ambitiously will describe a universe which can be, and perhaps should be, envisioned in the place of the traditional one. And moving on, this is in Dr. Faustrol, Pataphysician, neo-scientific novel. God is a tangential point between zero and infinity. And he Days and Nights. I'll just read this real quick because it's kind of like aleatory. I didn't pick these, so I just wanted to just jump at some that I think are interesting. And he had to have freedom, not even that, just to read and sleep in peace without a uniform, sooner still. The military hospital is the most cheerful of military buildings because there are so few uniforms inside. Which leaves us with Alfred Jarry pushing back a bit against the idea of war, and also being political, which, as I've said many times, much of avant-garde writing was political. To have so many avant-garde writers now saying that they're apolitical is pretty much hilarious to me. Coming up, I will have Borges, in which I will discuss Guy de Maupassant also, because I'll be talking a little bit about the short story, I guess. But as Gabe Hudson was talking about a lot on Twitter recently, wanted to change that name from short stories. And I think, one, we could just use the term fictions as Borges did, or as I like to call it, exploratory prose. So that'll be coming up. I'll definitely be getting at Hank Williams, because he's another Virgo. And I think that's it. Have a good night. Thank you.